Thanks for listening to KATH 910 AM Frisco, Dallas, Fort Worth. Catholic radio for your soul in North Texas on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Heard also at grnonline.com and on your smartphone.
Welcome to The Quest from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network. Join us as we journey together on this pilgrimage of faith. And now your host, Sarah Soto.
Hey y'all, it's good to be with you on this beautiful Monday afternoon. You know, as we approach deeper, or as we go deeper and deeper into November, we're holding out hope here in Texas that it's gonna cool down. I think it's about 90 degrees today, which is an embarrassment. Maybe it's like 88. But when I was preparing for our show today, I was reflecting on Veterans Day, this day where we honor our veterans, and I was thinking a lot about my late grandfather. I'd like to start by saying that maybe my situation is unique, but surely, and don't call me Shirley, plenty of our listeners have a similar situation. I know it's not, what's the word? Well, I know it's not exclusive to the Hispanic community for children to be raised in multi-generational homes by grandparents and so on and so forth, but I certainly came home from the hospital to my grandparents' home. That's where we lived on and off with grandparents, with one set of grandparents, with the other set of grandparents until I was probably around 9 years old. And so I'm very, very, very grateful to have had the daily influence of my grandparents in my life because, and that's what I'm gonna focus on today. I have two of my grandparents that are still living, and two have gone before us. And the two that have passed away, obviously I can't say, right? I can't say with certainty. And this is like one of those take out a pen and paper and write this down moments. Take note. I know it's very comforting for us to wish our grandparents and this is the only time I'm going to say this on the show today, but I just want to remind everybody, I know that it is very consoling when a loved one, especially a parent or grandparent that we're very close to, passes away, and then we continue to, I don't know what part of the country or part of the world that you're listening from, but here it's pretty common in Texas anyway, to honor our loved ones on their birthdays and wish them this is an open quote, happy heavenly birthday. And I think like in our Catholic faith, the heavenly birthday is when you enter into heaven, right? So the day that you die. But I think what they're doing is more saying, I know you're in heaven and it's your birthday, so enjoy your birthday in heaven. So I know it's very comforting to assume that our loved ones are in heaven. We want them to be in heaven. We hope and we pray for them to be in heaven, but we certainly can't assume that they're in heaven. The church can formally declare, right, whether someone is a capital S saint, but they don't formally declare that someone is in hell or in purgatory. And so for us it's a really bold assumption for us to say, well, Grandma Sally is definitely in heaven beyond the shadow of a doubt with absolute certainty, and so I will not pray for her soul in purgatory because she made it. So let's not assume anyone made it, although that would be really, really nice. So please, 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 please continue to pray for those that have gone before you and your family, for the eternal repose of their soul, and for all of the souls, the holy souls in purgatory. Okay, I'm off the soapbox. That being said, there are countless, I literally mean countless, we could never know, only the Lord knows, countless lowercase s saints in our lives and in the world. Many of them have gone before, many of them are living now, and no one is ever going to know their name, right? They're never going to have candles in the grocery store with their face on it that you can light and ask for their prayers and intercession. The church is never going to formally declare, right, your Aunt Betty a saint with a capital S. right? Like there's a lot of reasons why, but most saints, I would say most saints, most of the people who are in heaven live a quiet life. They live a hidden life. For example, we don't know really much of anything we don't know anything about the Lord's life from the time he was 12 until he entered into public ministry. We don't know anything about that hidden life. And there's a real beauty in that hiddenness. And I think what it communicates to us is something really essential, is that he could have done anything that he wanted, right? Anything that he could have spent his time, because he's God, in any way that he found appropriate. But the way that he found the most fitting and the way that he found the most appropriate was he spent his life under obedience to his parents, with his family. And so it communicates something to us about the importance of family, about the importance of obedience to our parents and relationship with grandparents. I imagine our Lord was the best grandson ever. You know how you get a shirt, like you get your mom a shirt for when you have a child, and it's like, best grandma ever. Or I have the best grandson in the world. Well, surely Saint Anne and Joachim said that, and it was actually true. But there are so many people in our lives, right? Whether it's our grandparents, whether it's our own parents, or, aunts and uncles, our godparents, people that we know. There are people that we see exemplify sanctity in this life, right? Because a lot of times we look to the saints and think of someone sort of like in this kind of gauzy, floating kind of cloud with a halo, and it's a very distant image for us, because we're in the muck of the world, in the ugliness of the world. We have to listen to people talk about politics like every single day, all day long. It's a disaster. It's a total disaster. And I'll tell you this: there's so much to be said for the examples in our lives that bring us back to the church, that pray us back into the church, that pray the world into they've interceded for us and asked the Lord not to smite us the 18,000 times we needed to be smote in the last half hour. Matt, do you know any little s saints in your life, or people that exemplified the faith in your life that are never going to be famous and big lights?
Oh, definitely. Although I'm curious, is it smote or smoted? I'm not really sure which is.
I think
both sound right.
I think it's smited.
Oh, that sounds Irish.
I was going for Scottish, so thanks.
All right, pretty good. Yeah, so I mean, all my grandparents were holy people. None of them are with us on this earth. I do have a fun story just to tell about my grandmother on my mom's side, who was the last one to leave us. My mom and she left us within the last year. She suffered at the very end of her life. My heroic parents took her in and cared for her, so she didn't have to be in a nursing home until her final hours. But my mom just sent me a picture of her with a lock of her hair in the picture, sort of implying, here's some first-class relics of your grandmother. Now, I agree with you, and I do pray for my grandparents and all my relatives every single day in my rosary.
Yeah.
And, you're right. We should never assume. And, if they make it to heaven, they're going to be so delighted that we're praying for them that they're going to pray for us, or they're going to use those prayers in an efficacious way for somebody else who's
Absolutely.
maybe a family member who's in need. So it's never a wasted prayer. But I was kind of like, Mom, I don't know if you should have assumed that. But, if the canonization of my grandmother ever gets open for some reason, I will have a first-class relic.
There you go.
A couple locks of my grandmother's hair. So I thought that was adorable. My mom is very sweet and very Catholic and very loving. And if you knew her, that's like a very classic move for her. So.
Yeah, I love that. And right now, I know that my husband is absolutely giving all of his attention to our toddler right now, as he does so graciously every time I do the show. But, honey, if you're listening, you have permission to save all my head. You can save all my hair for when I die, so that everyone gets a first class relic. Okay, you can shave it off. Just put me in a veil, because I have to go first. That's the rule. I like that story a lot.
Add me to the list too. If your husband wants to send me
Oh, I thought you were going to say add you to the list where you can like totally
Oh, I mean, if he wants
shave
to
your
take care of me too, but the likelihood that I'm going to be of that status is probably lower than the likelihood that you'll achieve that
Well,
status.
if I don't achieve the status of sainthood, and everyone wants a relic of my hair, you can make a great wig for a child in need. You can make a great wig out of this head of hair. Actually, I've been asked if it was a head of a wig before, and that is not the point of today's show. So today, what I want.
I was like, that's a nice tangent. Like, just think of the child who gets like a wig that's made from a saint, and they're just walking around all the time with a relic on their head. I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry to take you off on that.
No. What a beautiful head of hair. You
Yeah.
think that if that's real human hair, let's pray for that person, their internal repose. That person's, oh my gosh, imagine in purgatory just bald. Please pray for me. Please pray for me. It's very uncomfortable. All right, I'm going to say extra prayers for those souls in purgatory because I said that joke. But in all honesty, in all sincerity, probably most of us who come from even just a single grandparent in our lives that was a faithful practicing Catholic have stories where we can very clearly see that there was a real effort to know, love, and serve God, and to be in sacramental communion with the Most Holy Trinity. And these are the saints of our lives. Now, these are the examples in our lives that we can look to with a realistic hope to say, like, wow, I watched this person overcome, like, horrible things, and they still loved God so much. There's a lot of beauty in that, and I'm just really looking forward to sharing those wonderful stories of my own grandparents and taking your calls to hear all about the saints in your own lives that we may never hear about unless you call and share here on The Quest. We'll be back in just a minute.
Thank you for listening to the Guadalupe Radio Network and being part of the family. Families pray for each other. We would be honored if you would let us pray with you and for you. You don't even have to tell us your name. Just go to our website, grnonline.com, or call our prayer request line and leave us a message at 800-395-4008. That's 800-395-4008. We will be praying for you every day.
Hey, Keith Downey here, host of Morning Joy, where truth matters. Last Saturday, Rome's most important church celebrated its 1,700th anniversary. That is a long time. It blows my mind that one building that old is still being used in our faith. Vincenzo Rendazzo will join us on the next Morning Joy to talk about St. John Lateran and what it means for you this week. Listen weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Eastern, or subscribe to Morning Joy wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to The Quest, an extraordinary journey where every step brings us closer to discovering God's love for us. Want to join the conversation? Give us a call at 877-757-9424.
Hey y'all, welcome back to The Quest. I'm your Monday, Thursday host, Sarah Soto. I'm a Catholic wife, mom, and speaker. For more information or to contact us, shoot us a message at thequest@grnonline.com. In today's show, we're talking about the hidden saints in our lives, the many ways that they led us by word, deed, and example to love the Lord, to know and keep getting back up, to keep going to confession, and to keep having faith and trusting in His plan for their lives. And there are just, like I said earlier, there are countless people in our lives that have lived these lives of holiness, that they truly love the Lord. They lived lives of sacrifice and prayer, and the world is never going to know who they are. And so in honor of my late grandfather, who was a veteran on Veterans Day today, I'd like to share a little bit about his life and the influence that he was on me, and also my late grandmother, the beautiful Irish lowercase s saint, I believe. She lived in a way that absolutely exemplified love of Christ and love of neighbor. And so in honor of the two of them and the hidden lives that they led, and these weren't grandparents that were married to each other, right? So both my living grandparents are widowed. There's like a lady version and a male version, but we don't have to get into that. Anyhow, my late grandfather, who passed away just a couple of years ago, was a Marine. And my late grandmother, who passed away several years now, almost 10, was a fiery Irish nurse who used to, and you hear those stories of, when I was your age, I used to walk 30 miles in the snow just to get my grandmother actually did walk miles and miles and miles in the snow to go to mass, to go to daily mass. She wanted to be a nun very badly. And she became a nurse, and she was serving and helping in Germany. And that's where she met my grandfather, in mass. And he said, I think something along the lines of, "You are the whitest thing I've ever seen," because he was from South Texas. He had never seen a woman. He'd never seen a person so white. Thanks, Momo. That's where I get my translucent color from. I appreciate it as a Hispanic person. It's always fun to make sure to clarify that I'm Hispanic with everyone who asks. But their lives are obviously, like I said, if you're just now tuning in, I was in the unique position where we basically lived with grandparents, either set of grandparents, for many years, and they were absolutely essential parts of my upbringing, and they formed much of who I am. And to be parented by not just my parents, but their parents, meaning it felt oftentimes like I had 6 parents. And I mean that in the best way possible, because obviously my grandparents, right, born predominantly in the 40s, are just a generation of, I don't know, they're just like made out of iron. They're just made out of iron. They have like hearts of gold, right? And they love the Lord, but they're just unbreakable. You cannot break these people, and you cannot break their faith. You cannot shake their faith. It is immovable. And I wish so badly that my generation, and even my parents' generation, had gotten more of that. Maybe some of that hardship could have done us good. I mean, things have been very easy in my lifetime. I mean, I never seen I never sent my boyfriend off to war. It's just been very, it's been very easy. And I think all that ease has made me, and maybe you, if you're listening, this is not an accusation, this is just, if you are like me and if you're of my generation, it's made me a little soft. It's made me a little soft, and it's made me more movable. It's made me more shakeable than my grandparents' generation. And so what I'd like to do is, we'll keep the phone lines open for the show, but I'm going to be sharing some stories about my grandparents, but I'm also going to be interjecting some qualities that I was really thinking about this and praying about this, and what are some of the most common traits that are capital S saints, right? Canonized saints possess. Obviously, not all of them are brilliant theologians, so that's out the window, right? Some of them are like Saint Bernadette was illiterate, right? So what are the common traits? Obviously virtue, right? But I really wanted to hone in on a couple of the most common traits that saints possess, and how that can pretty easily translate into our simple day-to-day hidden lives, and how I certainly witnessed these common traits that many of these canonized saints possess. I certainly witnessed my grandparents possess many of these qualities, these very common qualities found in canonized Catholic saints. I witnessed my grandparents possess many of them, and possess them well. That being said, if you have examples in your life, grandma, grandpa, your own parents, an aunt or an uncle, people who helped raise you, or your neighbor, if you have people in your life that are never going to be formally canonized saints, right? We're never going to have their name up in lights. You're never going to see 1,000 holy cards getting blessed at the Vatican with their pretty face on them. But they touched your life, and they inspired you, and they helped you in your faith journey. I want to hear about them. I want to hear what made them saintly, what made them holy, and how did they inspire you, and how did they live their lives? I want to hear some qualities about them. I want to hear their story. This is an opportunity to let them let them be a little famous, if you will. 877-757-9424. Who are the people who lived saintly lives in your life? Those hidden lives that we may never, ever hear about unless you call and share here today on The Quest. 877-757-9424. Tell me about your grandma, your grandpa, holy people, everyday people who lived holy lives and were examples of virtue and sanctity. That's 877-757-9424. First and foremost, I think it's important to say that I'm not saying that either my late grandfather or my late grandfather were perfect. And I'm not saying they're in heaven. I certainly pray for both of them and for their eternal rest, right? I'm going to pray until the day that I die, like they're in purgatory. And all of us should be doing that. But there were many qualities that both my grandmother and my grandfather had that are holy. They had holy qualities. And first I'll say, because it's Veterans Day in honor of my grandfather, who was a Marine, I'll say that, like, I wouldn't describe him as a nice guy. Like, he's so nice. He's just the nicest guy, you know? I mean, I know some people that I would describe that way, but my grandfather is not one of them. Now, he wasn't cruel by any means, but niceness wasn't necessarily a quality that I would have given him in a description. But this man, rock solid, absolutely rock solid. And what I mean when I say rock solid, I mean he always did the right thing. Do you know anybody like that? You have anybody in your life that always does the right thing? I mean, when I say the right thing, I mean this guy never missed Mass on Sunday. He always tithed. He always did the right thing. He always held doors open for people. He always treated women with tremendous respect. He always looked at men in the eyes and shook their hands and said his first name and his last name. Like, he always, just a really upstanding guy. And I can't wait to share more about my late grandfather. But we have a call from Steve, who's on the line. Steve, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, thanks for calling.
No problem.
You got somebody in your life you want to share about?
My mother.
Okay.
Hey, well, let me say, she was a very devout Catholic woman. I mean, very. We had in our life, my mother was the, keeper of the faith in our family. She was very devout. Dad was an alcoholic. It was a very tough life. But she had 6 kids to raise, basically, after my dad lost his job and never could get another one. And this was when mothers were stay-at-home moms. So this situation was very bad. And I don't know how we would have ever made it without her. Of course, her faith was in God, and she'd pray. I remember she'd get up in the morning and pray for an hour, and she'd work so hard all day long, cooking, cleaning, doing everything she could to make a house and a home. And then any kind of break, there she was, sitting with her rosary, praying her rosary. And she made sure we knew our faith. We went to Mass on Sunday, and if we didn't have a ride, with no excuse, we just got out, just took off walking. I mean, it's not like we had to walk 30 miles in the snow, as you were talking about. We may have been 10 blocks, but we didn't miss Mass. There was no excuse.
Wow.
And, of course, we went to confession on a regular basis. We went to our, at that time, catechism. And, I mean, she set the law. She set it down. And anytime we messed up, there was the rod, as they say. She made sure she disciplined us, made sure when we did something wrong, we suffered. We knew if you did wrong, you suffered. And, I mean, she wasn't abusive, don't get me wrong.
Right.
And she always spoke the truth, always lived her life according to what she preached. And she was a good person. I mean, she was always kind to help anybody, give of herself. She was, like I say, she was a total selfless person. She sacrificed so much just for us.
It sounds like she poured her whole life out for you guys. What a beautiful gift of a mother you have.
Oh, yeah. I like to say, it was fantastic. I used to tell everybody after she passed away, I said, if she didn't go to heaven, we're all in trouble.
I hope more than anything that my son thinks of me half as highly as you think of your mother after I'm gone. Thanks so much for sharing, Steve. Your mother's life, I'm sure, has touched many people's hearts like it's touched mine today. Appreciate you sharing.
No problem. Thank you. Yeah,
Thanks.
I'm very blessed in that area.
Yeah. It sounds like it. God bless you, Steve. Take care. You know, it's hard for me to, well, you all know if you've been listening for a while. And it's not like a competition amongst callers, but you guys get me choked up, man. I mean, here Steve is calling and talking about his mom who may be remembered, right, by her children and by her family, but, you know, she's never going to have, like, this, like, big fame that, like, these giant saints like Pope John Paul II have, right? I have, like, 152 pictures of Pope John Paul II in my house, and I don't have a single one of Steve's mom. But, I mean, yes, that's just a really beautiful story. And that's exactly the kind of story that I'm talking about, exactly the kind of life that I'm talking about, this hidden life where the life is an outpouring of self, whether in the vocation of motherhood, fatherhood, or even, even someone who never married, doesn't have any children, or someone who, struggles with infertility. They never had children. They were married. I mean, it doesn't require motherhood, right, or fatherhood. Saints, obviously, like, I think we often thought of, like, sanctity, well, that's another talk for another time, but I think a lot of people used to think that holiness and sanctity, we've made a picture of you out of stained glass in the church, was for religious, and that's just simply not the case. It's for all of us, right? The universal call to holiness. And so, like Steve mentioned, and I really, really, really love this. He was saying, like, basically how on earth did we get by? Like, how could we have gotten by with the circumstances that we were in life? And he said something really key for me, something that's very essential to my sort of common qualities of Catholic saints that I comprised. And that's like a deep and profound trust in God. And that's one of the most common qualities you find in saints, is they have an unwavering belief in God and an unfailing trust in him. Even in the most challenging times of life, when it feels like, oh, woe is me, like it's all over, like there's no coming back from this. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. Like, even in those kind of moments in life, the saints share their unwavering belief that God is going to be there and work it out. Share the stories of the saints in your life. 877-757-9424. That's 877-757-9424. Tell me the stories of the people in your life that lived holy lives, that loved the Lord and lived for him. 877-757-9424. We'll be right back.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson. On Friday, Idaho state attorneys took a Supreme Court order back before the Ninth Circuit for a hearing to defend its strong abortion restrictions. Signed into law by President Reagan, EMTALA is the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Law. While it requires doctors and hospital ERs to care both for women and their unborn children, the current Biden White House bureaucratically rewrote EMTALA regulations to include abortion. After millions in abortion industry advertising spent persuading voters, 7 states passed abortion referenda. To give you an idea of the abortion industry money spent on last Tuesday's election, in their failed effort just in Florida, radical abortion advocates spent $75 million. Yet, New York State is alone among all states now pledging to go after any threat to abortion as a constitutional right. Reverend Jim Hardin is CEO of Compass Care Pregnancy Services and says pro-life individuals, pregnancy support centers, churches, essentially all pro-life activity may be regulated. This is Life News Radio. Catholic Vote is telling how Hispanic Catholics voted for President Trump 53-46. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson is describing motivations in last week's election, saying Americans chose economy and border security over abortion extremism. And Susan Wiles last worked in Washington, D.C. for Ronald Reagan and Jack Kemp. After years in Florida helping elect the likes of Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis, Susan Wiles, daughter of sports icon Pat Summerall, is moving from Trump campaign manager to become Mr. Trump's White House chief of staff. She is the first woman to serve since President Truman instituted the post 80 years ago. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
You're listening to The Quest, a pilgrimage of faith. Have a question or something to share? Call the show live at 877-757-9424.
Hey y'all, welcome back. If you're just now tuning in, I was saying earlier from a story that our producer Matt shared that my husband has permission to cut off all my hair to save as first-class relics, just in case I become a canonized saint. And I just wanted to update everyone and say that my husband texted me and says he's planning to shave my head. So good on you, dear. Because it would have to be only in death that would look well, it doesn't matter. Oh man, I hope I get it back if I get to heaven. My resurrected body. Just walking around bald in heaven. Hey everyone. Today we're talking about the hidden saints, the saints in our lives, or the people that lived saintly lives, virtuous lives, the people who really loved the Lord and set examples for us and kept our minds and hearts focused on the Lord, or helped refocus our minds and hearts on the Lord because of the way that they lived their lives. Now, what inspired me to share this are the lives, the stories of my grandparents. And I've shared a lot, I think, throughout these last couple of years we've been together about the life of my grandmother. And if you have a story about your grandmother, or your grandpa, or your parents, and the beautiful lives that they led, and you'd like to share with us, I really would love to hear about them and the way that they lived. I find it inspiring, and it helps me remember what matters. So give us a call at 877-757-9424 if you've got a story about someone who lived a very holy life and had and was virtuous, and you want to share their story here with us on the air. 877-757-9424. Tell me about someone in your life who lived a holy life that is no longer with us. 877-757-9424. So in composing this sort of list of what are the common qualities that are found in Catholic saints, right? Not all of them are mystics. Not all of them are soccer players, right? And not all of them were coding websites like Carlo Acutis, and certainly not all of them were contemplating the Holy Trinity walking on the seashore like St. Augustine. And so I think it's, it's the qualities that are the virtuous qualities that we find in them that are the most common thing that they share. And first and foremost, like I was sharing, the deep and unwavering trust in God, perseverance and courage, right? Courage through the most difficult of times, focused on Christ. And there's so many examples of this in the saints' lives, especially okay, I've got this terminal disease. Lord, if that's what you want, I want it to. That example of holiness it changes people's lives, just witnessing it. And so deep trust in real faith that the Lord is there, always going to be there, and that he's guiding you no matter what the circumstances you're surrounded by is huge. And I have to say that my late grandmother, named appropriately Mary Ann, the two most beautiful names I think a woman can possess, her life was marked by suffering. It was marked by suffering. There was a massive radiation exposure in her area of Ireland when she was very little, and she and all of her siblings had tons of complicated illnesses as a result. And she, from a very young age, I think she was in her late 40s, when she got diagnosed with breast cancer and had to have a double mastectomy, which is much more common now, but when she was in her late 30s, it was not very common. And it was, every couple of years, it was something, right? Complications from this and complications from that, and different cancers, and then this massive heart attack, and then an open bypass surgery, right? All these things, just one thing after another. And something about her that you will find, a quality that you will find. Like I said, you won't find the same qualities and the same taste in music in every saint, but there is a quality you will find in every single saint, and that is the virtue of humility. And certainly my late grandmother possessed that. She was extremely humble. I actually never heard her brag or boast about anything in her life. She had a lot of amazing qualities. She had been very richly blessed with children who loved her, grandchildren who loved her, and she never thought herself to be better than anybody. She had a very humble upbringing, but she was truly humble. She had a truly humble heart. She knew she had strengths. She knew she had a lot of blessings, but she certainly recognized her own limitations. And some of us may struggle to recognize that we do in fact have limitations, and a lot of us can even have that. There's that like false sense of humility too, right? Which is that, like, for instance, me, your Monday Thursday host here on The Quest, God made me. He made me funny, okay? Not funny looking. He made me funny. I got a good sense of humor. I can make people laugh. It's a gift that I have. But if someone said, "Oh gosh, Sarah, you are so funny. Sarah, you're just so funny. You just crack me up." And if I were to, turn my feet inward to make them pigeon-toed and kick the dirt and look down and say, "Not me. I'm never funny. I don't have a funny bone in my body. I'm just a heaping pile of seriousness, and I'm not. I've never made anybody laugh in my life." That'd be like a false sense of humility, right? It would be like they're complimenting me. They're recognizing this gift that God has given me to make people smile, and I'm denying it outright, right? So it's like, I'm not really, I know that God gave me that gift. Like, it's true. He did give me that gift. And so acknowledging that I don't make people smile because of my own glory or my own power, but because the way God has gifted me, that he allows by his own glory and his own power to bring people happiness, to bring people joy through the gifts that he's given me. So you got to recognize your own limitations and then move towards the service of others, right? Instead of service of self, instead of trying to make it all about you. And so that's certainly a quality that my grandparents both shared. My late grandfather and my late grandmother, they were both very humble. They knew everything that they had was from the Lord. For example, I think I took for granted that neither one of them ever questioned their faith. Say I had this big, as you know, if you've listened for a while, I had this big existential crisis when I was a teen, and I was doing everything I could to break away from the faith, and I was questioning everything, and I thought I was very original and very smart. I thought I was the first person ever to be like, "Wake up, lemmings. This is just a bunch of made up stuff, guys. Like, haven't you ever given this any thought? How do we know this is real?" Like, I just thought I was like really unique, and I had never thought about it. So I had kind of looked sort of with some pity on my grandparents, thinking like, they never questioned this. They just like blindly just kept chugging along, going to mass, and they kept, giving their money and all their time and praying every day for an hour a day. Who do they think they are? I certainly used to look at them with pity when I was young and dumb. And now that I'm old and a little bit less dumb, I have to look at them and honor the reality that they had unwavering faith, and they knew that whatever they had came from the Lord. And I've shared with you all that I'm the product of, I was conceived out of wedlock to teenage parents, and was very, very, very grateful for the gift of my life. But I never really talked about it with my grandfather. And when he was close to dying, he began to text a lot. And when Roe v. Wade was overturned, he texted me. And he called me cheesy. That's for another show, for another time. Or our exclusive listeners who donate to the share-a-thons of Guadalupe Radio Network. I'll give you the full explanation. And trust me, it's embarrassing as to why my grandfather called me cheesy. But he said, "Cheesy, I just want to know what you think of Roe v. Wade being overturned." We never talked about politics, this guy and I, or anything related. Certainly not about abortion. Just kind of like just coming out swinging, like right out the gate, just like full force, not like, "So taxes." And it was just like, "What do you think about Roe v. Wade being overturned?" I'm just curious, because he knew I'm really involved in the church. I don't know to what extent, but so I kind of gave this long response, and I said, I think that the overturning of Roe v. Wade is going to give opportunities for more children like myself who were conceived in less than ideal circumstances to have the opportunity to live. And so I'm extremely grateful that it's been overturned and, blah, blah, blah. I went on this whole thing. And he said, and he'd never said anything like this to me in my life, because, again, we never talked about the circumstances of my conception. We never talked about abortion. And he was not an emotional guy. He was not like a heart on my sleeve kind of guy at all. Like, he was a Marine, he's Mexican American, like just very, very, very traditional and straightforward and straight, like just like the best posture, like boots shined every day kind of a guy. And he said, well, when we found out your mom was pregnant, we never even thought that abortion was a possibility, and that's because of the way that our Catholic faith guides us to think and make decisions. And it blew me away. I was like, he's this guy, when I was a teenager, like, this guy's never given a thought to anything. He's just repeating these prayers and showing up and giving money to the bishop. And I just was so, like, pessimistic and cynical about the world. And here my grandfather had been, right, like this very successful and hardworking man, finds out that his oldest daughter, as a teenager, is pregnant. And he's like, okay, what do you need? How do we support you? Like, you get married? Like, okay, that didn't work out. All right, you're living with us. We're taking care of you. We're providing for all of your meals. We're helping with whatever we can help with. And it's just very, it was just never a question. It wasn't, and he didn't have to have like a pro-life t-shirt, right, on. He didn't have to have like a bumper sticker on it, and he didn't have to get on Facebook and say, babies, he didn't, he lived it. He cared for his daughter and his grandchild when they were in profound need, and he never bragged about that. He never said, he's never rubbed it in anyone's face. He took us all in and took care of us and provided for us for so long, and he did it because it was the right thing to do. And that was how he was. He did it because it was the right thing to do. And I fear, and I'm saddened, that my generation often chooses not to do things because they're not convenient, because they're not easy. And my grandfather always chose to do the right thing, and it didn't matter if it was difficult. It didn't matter if it was painful. It didn't matter if there was suffering involved. It didn't matter if it was very expensive, or if it didn't matter if there was a ton of effort that had to be done. He always did the right thing, and that's a quality that, for me, in my life, it was a virtuous quality that signaled sanctity. When I think of my grandfather, I think of someone who was unwavering in his faith. He was incredibly humble. He was very giving. He gave of himself. He poured himself out to care for his family, and he didn't think anything was more important than living his vocation, right, as a husband and as a father and as a grandfather. And so the circumstances of my birth had nothing to do with whether or not he was going to support or care for my mom and myself and my subsequent siblings and all of us. And so, yeah, no one's going to advertise. There's not going to be like a huge billboard, right? Grandpa Tony, the man, the myth, the legend. Like, you're not going to see that anywhere, but he touched my life by the example of his in a way that is forever marked. And so if you have someone in your life who forever marked yours with the way that they lived and the way that they loved the Lord, the way that they lived out their faith, I want to hear about them. I want to hear about that person. 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. Tell me about a person in your life who forever marked your heart with their love of the Lord, their love of neighbor. 877-757-9424. Talking about my grandparents today and the many qualities that they shared with a lot of the current capital S canonized saints. And some of those qualities we talked about so far are a deep, profound faith and trust in God, tremendous humility, and we'll hit several more when we get back from a short break. But there are a lot of people in our lives that are hopefully going to be in heaven, that we'll be reunited with if we make it to heaven, who aren't ever going to be famous. And so that's what I'm talking about today, the hidden lives all around us that we see and interact with every day or grew up around that are worthy of sharing Their lives are and stories are worth telling. Tell their story. 877-757-9424. That's 877-757-9424 here on The Quest. We're here with you every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen anywhere you stream, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can comment your questions or give us a call. 877-757-9424. We'll be right back.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for November 11th. Today we celebrate Saint Martin of Tours. He may have disappointed his father by becoming a conscientious objector, but today's saint went on to become one of the most popular saints in the Church. Martin was born in what is now Hungary in the 4th century, but raised in Italy. His father, a pagan military officer, expected his son to follow him into the Roman army. But the younger man was more interested in taking up the life of a Christian monk. Baptized at 18, 5 years later, Martin refused a war bonus, telling his commander, "I am a soldier of Christ." Martin became a monk, living first in Italy and then in France, where he established what might have been the first French monastery. He lived there for 10 years, preaching throughout the countryside and attracting disciples. By popular demand, he was made Bishop of Tours. He continued to live as a monk as he moved about his diocese, often on foot. One of the first saints not to have been martyred, Martin died in 397 after serving as Bishop of Tours for 25 years. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
This is The Quest from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network. Share the show with a friend. You can find us on social media. Want to listen again? We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back. It's so good to be here with you. It always is good to be here with you, but especially today as we remember and honor our veterans. And give them thanks for the gift of laying down their lives or being willing to lay down their lives for our country. I'm giving thanks especially for the gift of my grandfather, my late grandfather. You know what's super funny about my grandpa? So we all called him Grandpa Tony or Papa Tony. But his name, when you think of the name Tony, you think it's a nickname for what? Anthony, right? Nope. Name's not Anthony. Name's not Tony. It's not even close, in fact. But I think that they started calling him that at work when he worked. So he was an electrician for Pan Am. You heard that right. He was an electrician for Pan Am, and I don't think anybody could really say his name, even though he was like in Miami. You'd think they would be able to figure it out. His name was Trinidad, which means Trinidad, which is like a super Trinitarian name, obviously. And I think all of them were named after, so like Virginia, like the Virgin Islands, and then Salvador, like El Salvador. So they're like all named after countries. I don't really know the logic. I did meet my great-grandmother, but, you know, I didn't speak Spanish so very well. And so I didn't get to ask her, hey, what's up with all these names? But long story short, my grandpa, Tony, who was actually named Trinidad, was a really honorable man. And so we may know a lot of really honorable people because they like I said, they hold doors open for people. They say, you know, yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. And they like, you know, they show up and they do the things that you're supposed to do when you're like an honorable person, right? They like help people and they're kind and all that. But my grandfather, yeah, like he just always did what was right. And he had, you know, my generation is like, you never showed me you loved me and you never told me that. It's like, hello. This entire person's life was about serving you like and providing for you and giving you just because they didn't like compliment. Oh my gosh, it's my own generation that I roll my eyes at. That's like, I need affirmation in my skills and in my qualities. And you're just like, dude, like this person's in everything that he did was to give you a home, was to provide for you, and was to ensure that you never had to worry when like he had tons of worries when he was a small child They checked him out of school to shuck oysters when he was like 10. Okay, this guy was not like living a cush life. And so what did he do when he wanted to express love? He made sure you had a cush life. And so it's like we get all like worked up about, right? I don't know. Maybe we've gone to like, have you guys heard that phrase? Like, not everybody needs a podcast, right? Like, not everybody needs to have take that podcast mic away from that person. Okay, not everybody needs to be seen and heard on on social media. And so I just think that there's an element of that, and like not everybody needs to become like a counselor, right? Not everybody. I mean, not everybody needs to give advice. Like, what is it? Not everybody needs to become a psychologist online and say, see, you're only like this because your mom didn't hug you the recommended 12 times a day. And it's like, dude, she worked 3 jobs. I didn't even see her. I was like, what are you talking about? And so we often can confuse the love that our parents gave us, the love that our grandparents gave us, as them not being around or not being involved. And some of that might be true, right? They really did. I think my grandparents' generation was always like, yes, I'll take the extra shifts. Yes, I'll work the extra hours because I've got to provide for my family. And they're cut from a different cloth. And I was talking with an old friend of mine. He's actually the retired sheriff from our county here. And he was saying, you know what? And I think he was trying to excuse away some laziness he was seeing, but he was basically like, you know what's really neat about your generation is you guys will say no to extra time and extra and overtime in place of being with your families, And he was like, and that's like we didn't have that balance. If we were offered extra money and extra opportunity to work, we took it. There was never a question of maybe I should stay home with the kids and my wife this weekend and give her a break. Like he was like, we never thought that way. And he was like, so you guys have gotten some of that, I think we flipped it on its head a little bit too much. Like, we're all working from home and sweatpants. And anyway, I just think it's very characteristic of my grandfather's generation to be, to show love by means of providing everything he could possibly provide and by working extremely hard and without fail, taking his family to mass every single Sunday. No excuses. And so I think maybe severe illness was one for them, but even then, you never know. But also it wasn't like people had a cough and you're like, oh, get away from me, 6 feet away, or I don't know. Anybody triggered by that? So the qualities that these saints have that I see in my grandparents' lives, the qualities that many of these canonized saints possess, like we were talking about earlier, is a profound trust in God, that no matter what the circumstances of their life, no matter what's going on, it could be the worst thing that ever happened, that God is He's going to bring you through to the other side, and that the only way out is through with God, towards God, in service of God, in trust of Him. Also, profound humility, right? Recognizing that you have limitations, whatever gifts you do have come from the Lord, and understanding that apart from Him you can do nothing. And the poorer you are, meaning the more you rely on Him, the more humble you can actually be. Also, it's one of the most common, I think, after humility, traits that the saints possess is simple. I mean, it's charity. Like I know we all know this, but the saints often express and live out a powerful witness of love for God and neighbor. They show compassion and kindness, and their whole lives are often dedicated to helping and serving others, especially the poor, the sick. And I think, it was Saint Therese that was on her deathbed, who snapped at one of her fellow Carmelite nuns, one of her fellow sisters. And I mean, it's like, you're dying. You're 24. You're dying of tuberculosis. If anybody could get a little bit irritable, it wouldn't be me, who was like, if I don't have chips and salsa, if they forgot the salsa, I am going to have a conniption. That's not reason for me to have a meltdown, but she's on her deathbed and she gets irritated and she kind of snaps at one of her sisters. But in that opportunity, does she say like, oh, I'm the worst person in the world and God's never going to forgive me, or I have the right to be angry because I'm dying? There's none of those things. Her reaction was simply, thank you, Jesus, for another opportunity to need and fall into your mercy. I need your mercy, Lord, and thank you for the opportunity to receive it for what I've done. And so, yeah, she didn't feel bad for herself, like, I'm the worst person in the world and I'll never get to heaven. She just thanked God for the opportunity to be shown mercy. Also, saints have, and many of us lack, me in particular, perseverance and resilience. Perseverance and resilience that, like, no matter what hardship is going on, they persist. They keep praying. So, like, a lot of the times when really bad stuff happens in your life and you're like, you kind of stop praying a little bit. Your prayer life goes dry and you don't feel like showing up and praying anymore. That's what sets the saints apart from us. They don't stop praying. They don't shorten their prayer time. They may find it more difficult to pray. Sure, that's like a normal human experience, but they show up anyway. So they persist in prayer, especially if they're suffering, if they're being persecuted, or if they're having to make a great personal sacrifice. They are steadfast in their mission. Last but not least, the saints possess often the quality of, the virtue of prayer and contemplation. Certainly both my grandfather and my grandmother, my late grandparents, had profound prayer lives. In fact, the older they got, the more time they had, the more time they spent in prayer. And I might think to myself, well, I'm spending almost every waking second of the day chasing after a 2-year-old who never stops to take a break of any kind. When am I going to pray? Great for them. The saints had all this time to contemplate all day and contemplate all night. But the reality is that my life right now, the way it looks, my life is a prayer. It's this kind of like desperate, like, be with me, Lord. Give me the strength in help me through this hour, Lord. This hour, he's all revved up. He took a nap. He's full of energy. Give me the grace and the strength, and help my time with my son that is like, takes all this energy and takes all this focus, right? Help it to bring me into deeper communion with the Most Holy Trinity. So these qualities help us live lives of virtue, and we can reflect Christ's love and presence to the whole world when we try to live like saints. Thank you all for listening. It's been such a great joy to be with you all here on The Quest. We're with you every Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. It is such a great joy, and as always, thank you for listening, and God bless you.
Celebrating 2,000 years of truth. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.